black investor. Pulled from first class 10 hours later, he buys the airline that shamed him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. People like you don't belong in first class. The sentence cut through the air like a crack of thunder, wrapped in velvet. The captain, tall and rigid in his white uniform, leaned forward, his fingers stabbing toward the chest of the calm man seated near the window. Every light in the cabin seemed to sharpen around them. The gold trim, the leather seats, the half-finished glasses of champagne like an audience holding its breath. Passengers froze mid-gesture. One woman lowered her phone but didn't stop recording. Elias Monroe didn't move. The navy of his tailored suit caught the cabin light, his silver watch ticking softly in the hush. His eyes held the captain's without a flicker. That stillness wasn't fear. It was control. The captain barked again, louder this time. "Sir," I said, "stand up. You must have taken the wrong seat." A flight attendant, her voice trembling, tried to step in. "Captain, maybe there's no mistake," he snapped. "Security will handle this." Across the aisle, a businessman chuckled into his drink. Someone whispered, "What did he do?" And no one answered. The kind of silence that follows injustice spread through the cabin like cold fog. Elias finally spoke, voice low and razor clean. "Are you sure it's your plane, Captain?" The words floated through the air, soft enough to make the insult sound like a riddle. The captain blinked, caught off guard for half a heartbeat, then roared back. Elias rose slowly. He adjusted his cufflinks, brushed an invisible wrinkle from his sleeve, and stood taller than the man shouting at him. "Don't worry," he said, tone even, unhurried. "I'll leave. Some lessons need empty skies to echo properly." He reached for his briefcase, black leather, no logo, and walked toward the aisle. Eyes followed him, some with pity, some with shame, some with that cruel curiosity that lives behind phone cameras. As he passed, the captain muttered, "Entitled fool." Elias paused at the doorway, just long enough for the microphones of every phone to catch his reply. "No, Captain," empowered. "There's a difference." Inside, the air collapsed. The captain straightened his uniform, pretending control had returned. But control had already changed hands. Down the jet bridge, Elias moved without hurry. The neon reflections on the polished floor shimmered under his shoes. His phone buzzed once. A message from his assistant waited on the screen. "We're still cleared for the acquisition call, sir." He typed 3 words. "Move it forward." He walked into the terminal light, quiet as a storm before it breaks. Somewhere behind him, the plane still gleamed under the floodlights, an emblem of arrogance, soon to be rewritten. The captain had shouted him off his plane. In less than 10 hours, that same man would be taking orders from Elias Monroe, the new owner of the sky he tried to deny. The hallway outside Gate 7 felt colder than it should have. Elias walked without haste, the rhythm of his shoes clicking against the tiles like a metronome for something unseen. Around him, travelers hurried in choreographed chaos, businessmen checking phones, parents dragging sleepy children, the steady pulse of departures echoing overhead. Yet he moved apart from all of it, calm and detached, like a man who had just stepped out of a storm, but carried the thunder with him. Through the glass walls, he could still see the airplane, its body gleaming under the floodlights. The same plane where a uniformed man had mistaken arrogance for authority. The same plane that, by morning, would belong to someone else. Elias's reflection merged with the aircraft's in the window, a silent overlap of humiliation and inevitability. He stopped near a row of seats, pulled out his phone, and opened a message thread labeled Helena. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and then came her reply. "That's the airline, sir." "Are you certain?" Elias's thumbs moved once more, certain enough to teach altitude. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and exhaled slowly. His breath fogged against the glass. Inside the plane, he could still see movement, the captain pacing near the door, the attendants whispering, passengers craning their necks to look. The drama still lived on that side of the glass, but Elias was already writing the sequel. A voice behind him interrupted the silence. "Sir, are you all right?" It was the young flight attendant from earlier. She looked small now, away from the authority that had bullied her into obedience. I'm sorry about what happened. He shouldn't have spoken to you like that." Elias studied her face. She was earnest, shaking slightly, clutching her ID badge like it could protect her. "You don't need to apologize for another man's fear," he said. "Fear speaks louder than rank." She nodded, eyes glistening. "It's just, I've seen things like that before, but never so openly." He offered a faint smile. "That's the beauty of daylight. It exposes what pretends to fly in the dark." The intercom above them called for final boarding. The door to the jet bridge closed with a heavy sigh. The attendant whispered, "He'll think he won." And Elias replied, "Only if he sleeps before sunrise." He turned away, heading for the exit. Outside the terminal windows, snow had begun to fall, a slow, deliberate curtain over the runway lights. Each flake drifted like time choosing its side. He stepped into the chill air, his driver already waiting by the curb. The car door opened silently. Inside, the warmth wrapped around him, but the temperature didn't change in his eyes. "Sir?" his driver asked, glancing through the mirror as they pulled away from the terminal. "Midtown office," Elias said. Tonight, the city swallowed them, neon signs streaking across wet asphalt, the hum of winter engines filling the silence between thoughts. Elias looked out at the skyline, every tower sharp against the fog. Somewhere among those buildings, a team of analysts and lawyers was already assembling, unaware that a simple text from their founder had just shifted an entire industry's gravity. In his hand, the phone buzzed again. Helena's update arrived in real time. "Pre-market trading shows an opening. We can secure 51% by 6 a.m. He read it once, expression unchanged. The driver risked a glance. "Trouble, sir?" Elias's tone was level. "Opportunity," wearing arrogance as a uniform. Downtown lights flashed through the window. Reflections of gold and blue, sliding across his face like two sides of a coin. He loosened his tie, the faintest gesture of release. Beneath the calm exterior was a precision that didn't need rage to function. Rage burned out. Precision built empires. The car turned onto a quiet street lined with glass offices and shuttered cafes. Above the tallest building, a digital billboard glowed with the airline's logo, a silver bird rising into blue. Elias watched it pass, and for the first time that night, a small, almost invisible smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Sir?" the driver asked softly. Elias kept his gaze on the billboard. "Imagine how different that logo will look when it finally belongs to someone who earned the sky." Outside, the snow kept falling soft, endless, forgiving nothing. Inside the car, Elias closed his eyes for a moment, the echo of the captain's voice fading behind him like turbulence disappearing into distance. The elevator doors opened to the quiet hum of midnight glass and steel. Elias stepped into the penthouse floor of Monroe Capital, his reflection catching on every polished surface. The city glowed below him. New York, restless and alive, unaware that in this high-rise silence, an empire was rearranging its skies. Helena waited by the window wall, tablet in hand, face lit by the blue flicker of market data. Her posture was composed, but her eyes held the electricity of a woman who knew something seismic was about to move. "Sir," she said softly, "our analysts confirmed the parent company's leverage position. If we act before dawn, we can secure controlling interest." Elias placed his briefcase on the table, its click echoing in the wide room. "Very. 2 years of deferred maintenance contracts, debt hidden under 4 shell entities. They're trying to float on Image." He smiled faintly. "Then Image will be their storm." Helena hesitated. "This isn't just business anymore, is it?" Elias turned, his gaze steady. "Everything is business. Even dignity. Especially dignity." The line landed like a signature. He walked toward the glass wall, staring out at the fog gathering around the skyline. His reflection stared back, measured, patient, surgical. He had learned long ago that revenge without precision was chaos. Precision, on the other hand, was justice in a suit. Behind him, the team began to arrive. 3 analysts, a compliance officer, 1 lawyer, still tucking in his tie. Laptops bloomed open like instruments in a dark orchestra, warming up before the overture. Helena started the slideshow, graphs, numbers, the anatomy of a corporate body about to be dissected. Elias listened, but his mind replayed the captain's face, red with entitlement, shouting words meant to wound. He remembered the passengers who filmed, who looked but didn't see. He remembered the stillness in his own hands as he walked away. It wasn't humiliation he'd felt, then it was confirmation. Every empire needs a spark. That flight had simply lit the match. "Sir?" Helena's voice pulled him back. "Would you like to join the call with Zurich before we initiate?" Elias nodded. "Put them through." The screens came alive, faces in boxes, boardroom lights from 3 continents. One man greeted him nervously. "Mr. Monroe, we were told this was urgent." "It is," Elias replied. "By this time tomorrow, I'll need full authority over Skyreach Holdings." The faces blinked. "That's the parent company of Aero North Airlines?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Helena began outlining the acquisition strategy. A pre-dawn buyout through multiple shell firms, structured to look like routine portfolio expansion. The Zurich partners murmured approval. Everything would move silently until the markets opened. When the call ended, Elias leaned back, fingers steepled. 10 hours, he said quietly. "That's all it takes to rewrite altitude." Helena looked up from her screen. "You're not doing this to destroy them." "No," he said. "Destruction is easy. Correction is earned." The words hung in the air like scripture. He stood, walked back to the window, and pressed his palm against the cold glass. Below, the city's veins pulsed with headlights, bridges, motion. Millions of stories intersecting under the illusion of control. Somewhere out there, the captain slept soundly, believing the sky still belonged to him. Elias's phone vibrated again. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Sir, the video from Flight 912 is trending. Already 2 million views." He watched the thumbnail load a frame of the captain, pointing, mouth open mid-yell. The caption read, "Passenger removed from first class after mistaken identity." He set the phone down without reacting. "Let it spread," he said softly. "Truth needs witnesses." "Truth?" Helena exhaled. "This will go global." "Good," Elias murmured. "The world should see how arrogance looks before gravity corrects it." Outside, lightning flickered far beyond the skyline, turning the clouds silver for a heartbeat. The storm was coming, not weather, but consequence. Elias straightened his tie, turned toward his team, and said, "Run the numbers again." They nodded, already moving, fingers dancing over keyboards, screens pulsing with new calculations. The hum of power filled the room, a different kind of thunder. Elias glanced once more at the window. His reflection stared back, calm and resolute. "They took my seat," he whispered almost to himself. "Now I'll take their sky." And with that, the countdown began. The storm arrived before dawn, not in thunder, but in numbers. Elias sat at the head of the glass conference table, eyes fixed on a wall of glowing monitors. Each screen showed a different part of the operation unfolding. Zurich, Hong Kong, Toronto, each team moving in perfect synchrony. On one feed, the airline's stock price flickered, unaware of its own unraveling. Helena stood beside him, tablet in hand, her voice steady but quick. "We've acquired 38% through proxy accounts. London's moving faster than expected. The rest will clear once New York opens. And be the Singro, Warner Peter go 10 and a great main doctem." Elias nodded once. No triumph, no tension. The clock struck 4 a.m. A soft glow spilled over the city skyline. Down below, taxis drifted through the wet streets like yellow ghosts. Elias's reflection shimmered in the glass, half man, half architecture. "Do you remember?" he said quietly. "What I told you my grandmother used to say?" Helena shook her head. She said, "Never argue with someone flying low. Just rise higher." He turned toward her, eyes calm. "This is altitude. At the far end of the room, a young analyst raised his head from his laptop. "Sir, small issue. There's chatter online. Some investors are connecting the trending video to our acquisition activity." Helena frowned. "That's impossible. We masked every transaction." Elias smiled faintly. "Let them guess. The truth will still arrive on schedule." The room filled with the soft percussion of typing, of plans turning to reality. Each keystroke another nail sealing arrogance into its coffin. Below, the first rays of morning split through the skyline, catching on the frost of steel rooftops. The city was waking up. So was justice. Behind him, Helena's voice broke the rhythm. "Sir, with New York open, we'll reach 51% within the hour." He didn't turn. "Make it public at 60. I want them to read it on their own newsfeed." Minutes stretched, elastic and tense. Every beep, every data update felt like a drumbeat before revelation. Elias's phone buzzed another notification. Number, "Get off my plane," now trending worldwide. 10 million views. The caption read, "Passenger removed from first class, speaks softly, leaves quietly. Where is we followed us?" Helena tilted the screen toward him. "You've become a symbol overnight." He regarded it for a moment. "Unreadable. Symbols fade," he said. "Ownership doesn't." Then, almost on cue, another alert appeared. Market. Notice Skyreach Holdings experiences sudden stock volatility amid buyout rumors. Helena looked up. "They're awake." Elias finally turned from the window. "Good. Let's give them a proper sunrise." He pressed a button on the console, connecting to the legal division. A voice answered instantly. "Mr. Monroe, the contracts are ready for final authorization." "Execute," he said simply. On the screens, digital signatures cascaded one after another. In Zurich, bankers nodded. In Toronto, compliance officers stamped confirmations. The entire network pulsed with momentum, a global heartbeat synchronized by quiet resolve. Within moments, the airline that had humiliated him was no longer theirs. It was his. Helena exhaled, tension breaking in her shoulders. "It's done. You now own 63% of Skyreach Holdings, effective immediately." Elias's expression didn't change. He glanced once at the monitors, then back to her. She nodded, typing as he spoke. "Monroe Capital has completed the strategic acquisition of Skyreach Holdings, parent company of North Airlines. Our commitment remains clear to build systems where dignity travels first class." He read it once. "Good. Schedule it for release in 2 hours. By then, their PR team will still be denying it." The room went still, filled with the hum of servers and the quiet awe of victory executed without noise. Elias poured himself a glass of water. The sound of liquid against glass sharp in the silence. 10 hours, he said softly, half to himself. "That's all arrogance ever lasts." Helena allowed herself a rare smile. "He'll see it, you know. That captain. It'll be everywhere." "So," Elias met her gaze. "He'll see it when he checks the flight roster and finds my name on the board of directors." The first sunbeam reached across the room, landing on the table like a blessing or a warning. Elias lifted his glass slightly, as if toasting something unseen. Outside, the city roared to life, unaware that its skies now belonged to someone who had been told he didn't belong at all. The news broke at 8:07 a.m. Monroe Capital acquires Skyreach Holdings in overnight takeover. The headline rippled through financial networks like a tremor through glass. By 8:09, it had reached every newsroom. By 8:11, the airline's board members were calling one another in disbelief, voices cracked with panic and caffeine. Elias stood in front of the massive window of his office. Coffee untouched, the world below him moving in fast forward. Screens behind him blazed with red tickers, talking heads, and live coverage. He watched them with the calm detachment of a conductor who already knew the symphony's final note. In one corner of the office, Helena adjusted her earpiece. Media requests piling up. CNBC, Reuters, Bloomberg, BBC. They all want a quote. Elias didn't turn. "Let them wait. Silence makes truth sound louder." "Round." At that moment, the phone rang a private line. Helena glanced at the display. "It's Jonathan Crow." CEO of Skyreach. Elias smiled faintly. Put him through. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Mr. Monroe, Crow began, voice stiff and trembling beneath forced politeness. I just read the statement. You can't, this kind of move, surely there's a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Elias said evenly. Just correction, Crow stammered. This airline has a proud legacy, our reputation. Is what I bought. Elias interrupted, tone polite but surgical. And I intend to repair it. For a few seconds, all Elias could hear was Crow's breathing. Then the man tried again. Desperation bleeding through civility. Let's discuss terms. We can renegotiate equity, perhaps maintain joint leadership. No need, Elias said, voice quiet, measured. Leadership is earned through conduct. Consider this a transfer of altitude. He ended the call before the man could respond. Helena exhaled. You really think he'll step down without a fight? He'll step down. Arrogance always confuses noise with power. Outside the office, the city was exploding with headlines. Black investor who was removed from first class becomes airline owner. The photo that had started it all, the captain's finger in midair, Elias's still face in profile, was now a global symbol of reversal. Hashtags trended across continents. Number first class justice, number dignity flies high, number sky owned. Reporters gathered outside the Monroe Capitol building, their breath fogging in the cold. Cameras pointed upward, waiting for the man whose silence had rewritten the hierarchy of the skies. Elias finally turned from the window. Send a response, he said to Helena. But not a statement. A story, she raised an eyebrow. A story? Arrange a press conference at noon. No teleprompters, no script. Just truth. By mid-morning, the main lobby of the building was packed with journalists. Flashes burst like strobe lights across marble and steel. When Elias entered, the room fell to a hush that cameras could not record. He moved to the podium without hurry, every step measured like punctuation. Good morning, he began, voice calm and low. 10 hours ago, I was told to leave a seat I paid for. I was told, with words and with tone, that people like me don't belong in first class. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. I left that plane quietly, he continued, because dignity doesn't argue. It acts. He paused, eyes sweeping the room. Today, I didn't just buy an airline. I bought accountability. I bought a system that thought silence meant weakness. The journalists erupted in questions, but he raised a hand and the room obeyed. Don't ask me about revenge. This isn't revenge. This is reconstruction. When arrogance builds walls, progress buys doors. All do as have Arn. He stepped back from the microphone. The applause was hesitant at first, then growing, filling the marble hall like returning thunder. As he turned to leave, a reporter called out, Mr. Monroe, do you have a message for the captain from Flight 912? Elias paused mid-stride, looked back, and said evenly. Then he walked away. Helena met him at the elevator, expression half awe, half relief. You just changed how people see power. Elias pressed the button. The doors sliding open. Power doesn't need to be seen, he said. It just needs to be felt like gravity. The elevator closed, sealing the noise behind them. Outside, the city roared with his name. He smiled, faint and precise. The seat he had been forced to surrender was waiting for him again this time. Carved in marble, labeled Chairman. The black car glided to a stop in front of Skyreach headquarters, a mirrored tower of steel and glass that once symbolized everything Elias Monroe had been told he couldn't touch. The morning wind cut sharp across the plaza, sending the company's blue and silver flags snapping above the doors. Cameras were already there, waiting. Employees pressed against the windows, whispering. Elias stepped out, dressed in charcoal gray, the quiet precision of his movements sharper than any display of authority. Board assembled. Some members are resistant. He gave a brief nod. Resistance is part of takeoff. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, perfume, and fear. The receptionist who had once turned him away during an earlier visit now froze mid-sentence as he passed. Her lips formed his name, but no sound came. He gave a small, polite nod. They reached the boardroom, a cathedral of glass perched above the city. 12 executives sat around an oval table, their suits immaculate, their confidence fractured. The man at the head of the table, Jonathan Crow, rose halfway, then hesitated, uncertain if he should offer a handshake or a defense. Elias spared him the decision. "Sit down, Mr. Crow." His tone was even, but the authority in it was undeniable. "You're still CEO for the next 10 minutes. Let's make them productive." Crow swallowed. "Mr. Monroe, this takeover was legal," Elias interrupted. "You'll find the contracts airtight, but I'm not here to argue paperwork. I'm here to discuss culture." 7-7 Bogripo. He walked to the head of the table, Crow's chair, and placed his hand on the backrest. 10 hours ago, one of your employees mistook discrimination for discipline. He humiliated a paying customer in front of an entire cabin. That customer was me." The room went utterly still. One woman gasped softly. A man reached for his water glass and missed. Crow tried to recover, his face pale. "Mr. Monroe, if we had known, that's exactly the point," Elias said quietly. "You didn't know. You didn't look. You didn't think you had to." He paused, letting the silence weigh on them like gravity. "I don't need an apology. I need transformation." Effective immediately, Skyreach will launch a training initiative every employee, from pilots to board members, centered on ethical conduct, racial equity, and respect. It will be called the Dignity Flight Program. It is a go-away. Helena slid the printed document onto the table. "Outlined, funded, and ready for implementation," she said smoothly. Elias continued. "Next, community reinvestment. 10% of executive bonuses will be redirected to scholarships for young engineers and pilots from underrepresented communities. We build the future by lifting it." Crow finally found his voice. "You're dismantling decades of policy in a single meeting." Elias looked him straight in the eye. "No, I'm repairing what arrogance built crooked." He moved to the window, staring out at the runway and the distant planes lined up like silver birds, waiting for permission to rise. "When I was pulled from that seat, I realized something," he said. "They didn't take away my place. They confirmed how much higher I could go." Turning back to the board, his voice softened, but every word landed with weight. "You all built an empire in the sky. Now we'll make it worthy of the sky." Quote. The clock struck noon. He looked at Crow again. "Your 10 minutes are up." Crow stood slowly, gathered his papers, and bowed his head before leaving the room. When the door closed, Helena approached. "You didn't raise your voice once," she said quietly. "I didn't need to," Elias replied, watching a plane ascend through the clouds. "Altitude speaks louder than anger." The next morning, the world awoke to a different sky. At 7 a.m., every major network opened with the same headline: "Former passenger takes command of airline that removed him from first class." Anchors spoke his name with a mix of awe and disbelief, as if saying it too casually might alter gravity itself. Stock tickers scrolled with green arrows. Skyreach's value was already climbing, the irony so sharp it glittered. Inside Terminal 3, sunlight poured through the glass atrium. The same airline that had humiliated him was preparing its first flight under new ownership. Flight 912, the one where it had all begun. The terminal buzzed with reporters, employees, and passengers, craning to see him. Elias walked through the gate with quiet purpose, every step unhurried, precise. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards, only presence. Helena followed, expression calm, but eyes scanning everything. The air smelled of jet fuel and apology. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. "Same crew, same route, same number?" Elias adjusted his cufflinks. "Correction begins where the wound was made. It's..." As he approached the boarding counter, the gate attendant, a young man in a navy blazer, froze, then straightened. "Mr. Monroe, welcome aboard." "We're honored to have you." Elias smiled lightly. "Then let's make it a good flight." The jet bridge stretched ahead like a bridge between past and proof. Passengers already seated in first class looked up as he entered. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Phones discreetly rose. Someone whispered, "That's him." And then, at the far end of the aisle, the captain stepped out of the cockpit. He removed his cap, jaw tight. "Mr. Monroe," he said quietly, "I heard you were taking this flight." I, Elias raised a hand. "No need for speeches, Captain. Let's both do what we're good at. You fly the plane. I'll fly the company." In many a seven in the ridered. A few passengers chuckled softly, not in mockery but in awe. The captain nodded, swallowed hard, and disappeared back into the cockpit. Elias sat in seat 1A, the very seat from which he'd been pulled. For a moment, he just looked out the window. The reflection staring back wasn't of a man reclaiming a chair. It was of a man reclaiming the narrative. Helena leaned over. "You could have chosen a new seat," he smiled faintly. "Then they'd think I moved on." "I didn't. I moved up." The engines began to hum, a deep resonance that filled the air like memory finding closure. As the plane taxied, Elias opened his tablet. On the screen, the company's new slogan was being finalized. "Skyreach Airlines, where dignity always flies first." He approved it with a single tap. As they lifted off, the clouds swallowed the horizon. Below them, the city shimmered like a distant apology. A flight attendant approached with a glass of sparkling water. "Mr. Monroe," she said softly, "I just wanted to say what you did. It means something to all of us." He looked at her, kind but steady. "It only means something if it changes something. Make sure it does." When the plane reached cruising altitude, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Today's flight is special not for where we're going, but for who reminds us how we should fly." The cabin fell silent. A few people clapped quietly. Elias looked out at the endless blue. For the first time since that night, Helena whispered, "You did it." He shook his head slowly. "No, Helena, we're just beginning." Outside, sunlight broke over the wing, clean, blinding, unstoppable. By noon, the world had already turned his story into legend. Clips of the original confrontation filled every social feed, the captain's shout, the stillness in Elias's face, the quiet walk down the aisle. Then came the follow-up. Photos of him boarding the same flight as the new owner. Videos of passengers applauding when he sat back in seat 1A. Hashtags multiplied like sparks. Number Sky owned. Number First Class Justice. Number Altitude has no color. In offices and living rooms across continents, people replayed the moment he told the captain, "You fly the plane. I'll fly the company." It became the line of the year, clipped into memes, quoted in boardrooms, painted onto murals in Harlem and Johannesburg. But for Elias, there was no celebration, only purpose. Back at Monroe Capital, the communications team was drowning in press requests. Helena stood at the center of the room, headset on, directing the chaos with military precision. "Decline interviews, release statements only," she said firmly. "This isn't a victory tour, it's a reset." On the massive screen behind her, the numbers kept climbing. Revenue projections, stock surges, public trust metrics. Yet amidst the euphoria, Elias sat at the head of the table, untouched by it. His eyes weren't on the screen, they were on a single live feed showing the Skyreach customer lounge at JFK. A black couple checked in at the desk. The agent smiled, warm and genuine. No hesitation, no second glance. That, not the market, made Elias exhale. Helena approached quietly. "You've become a symbol, sir." "Symbols fade," he said. "Systems last. Let's build one that doesn't need me in the headline." Is activated. At that moment, a notification flashed across the top of the screen, a live broadcast request from Good Morning America. The host's message read, "We'd love to celebrate this historic moment with you." Elias smiled slightly. "Tell them I'll speak when dignity stops being breaking news." He stood, stretching his shoulders, the weight of the last 24 hours settling into something steadier. Not triumph, but transformation. "Schedule a meeting with the unions, the pilots, the service crew. I want every level of this company to see they're part of the flight path." Helena nodded, tapping notes into her tablet. "And the captain?" Elias paused. "Let him fly. Every landing from now on is part of his education." Later that afternoon, as sunlight streaked across the Hudson, he walked through Skyreach's main hangar, massive, humming with motion. Mechanics in blue jumpsuits looked up as he passed, some uncertain, others proud. He stopped beside a technician inspecting a wing panel. 23 years, sir. Then you've been holding this company up longer than anyone in a suit ever did, Elias said. That's going to change. Respect starts on the ground. The man grinned, grease on his hands, pride in his eyes. Thank you, Mr. Monroe. When Elias stepped back outside, the evening sky burned gold. A crowd had gathered beyond the fence. Airport staff, reporters, and strangers, holding signs that read, "Dignity flies first." Someone shouted his name. Cameras flashed again. He didn't wave. He simply looked toward the runway, where another Skyreach jet was preparing for takeoff. The engines roared, shaking the ground beneath his feet. Helena joined him, wind tugging at her hair. "It's everywhere now," she said. "You've changed the conversation." Elias watched the plane ascend through the clouds. "Conversations end," he murmured. "Cultures evolve." The roar faded into distance. What remained was silence, vast, earned, and full of promise. A week later, the city moved slower. The noise had turned into reverence. Morning news anchors spoke his name like a proverb, not as the man who'd been humiliated, but the one who'd rewritten what power looked like. Magazines called it the quiet takeover. Economists called it the most elegant act of corporate justice in modern history. Elias called it something simpler: balance. He sat alone on the terrace of his brownstone, the sun painting gold lines across the skyline. In the distance, a Skyreach jet ascended into the clouds, its wings catching the morning light. A week ago, that symbol had belonged to arrogance. Now it carried his signature. Helena arrived with a folder under her arm. "The Foundation's papers are ready," she said. "Skyward Initiative, fully registered, fully funded." Elias nodded. "Good. Make the announcement quietly. Let it speak for itself." The Foundation would fund scholarships for young black engineers, pilots, and aerospace designers, a new generation who would not have to buy respect to reach altitude. Each grant would bear a single phrase engraved in silver: "Dignity is the first ticket." Helena placed the folder on the table, hesitated, then said, "Do you ever think about that night? The flight?" Elias smiled faintly. "Every time I close my eyes. But not for the reason people think. It's not the insult I remember. It's the silence after it, the moment I realized silence could build something louder than rage." He poured 2 cups of coffee, motioning for her to sit. "Anger burns fast. Vision lasts." Down below, a car stopped at the curb. A young journalist stepped out, holding a microphone, surrounded by a small crew. "Mr. Monroe," she called up toward the terrace, "can we ask what drives you now that you've won?" He stood, leaning lightly on the railing. "Winning was never the goal," he said. "Correction was?" She smiled awkwardly. "So what's next?" He looked toward the horizon, toward the faint silver trace of another departing flight. "Teaching altitude," he replied. The reporter lowered her mic, stunned by the simplicity of it. Cameras kept rolling anyway. The clip would air later that night under the headline, "Elias Monroe redefines victory." As the car pulled away, Helena turned to him. "You know, you could have destroyed them completely. Publicly humiliated them the way they did you." Elias shook his head. "Destruction doesn't change the air we breathe. Transformation does." He walked back inside, pausing by the framed photo on the wall, a faded image of his grandmother standing in front of a small house in Detroit, hands rough from years of labor, smile unbroken. He touched the frame gently. "She used to tell me, 'Baby, if they won't give you a seat, build the plane.'" Helena's voice softened. "You did both." Outside, the hum of another departing jet grew louder, fading into the clouds. Elias stepped to the window, watching it disappear, a quiet pride settling behind his eyes. Voiceover calm, cinematic, like closing credits spoken by time itself. He never shouted. He never demanded. He just moved with purpose, and the world adjusted its altitude around him. He didn't raise his voice. He raised his value. It's not many got a grom, and somewhere above the noise, justice finally took its seat in first class. The screen fades to black. Title card. The skyward foundation building futures where dignity flies first.